So I wanted to make a video about battlefields because I noticed there are people talking about battlefields, and to be honest with you, I'm not really sure people understand what battlefields actually are. Um, for the record, battlefields are the leaderboard for battlefields, like that merit leaderboard when you press Shift P. It means nothing. It doesn't actually show you what players or what classes are good at PvP. What it shows you is how many points someone earned by going to the battlefields and playing the minigame. Now, playing the minigame doesn't mean they fought anybody. In fact, you can get an A rank without fighting anybody. And if you're on the nation that has the most players in it at that battlefield, you're even less likely to get attacked by anybody because everybody on the enemy team is already stuck in a fight. So if you're, and don't get me wrong, that means that the lower population nations will have a lot less merit in their battlefield leaderboard. But that doesn't mean that they earned it through PvP. There's a few problems with that, right? The first thing I have a problem with is there's PBM mechanics in battlefields that they don't really make sense for a PvP minigame. So why am I going into a PvP minigame and I'm fighting wabbits or wodents? Why am I picking flowers? Why am I fighting NPC militia guards? Why am I planting boxes in the ground? I understand it's meant to be a mini game, where you do a lot of things. You don't just fight people. And I would understand that. But the fact that you get almost the entirety of your merit by performing minigame actions that have nothing to do with PvP, it doesn't really leave any room for the leaderboard to be an indicator of a good PvPer. And anybody who gets to that rank, they know that already. I'm not insulting anybody because they already know that to get to that point, you don't really fight people. In fact, a lot of the times when people get to that rank, all they really did was farm points off their guildie at the entrance, and you'll see them do this. If you just stand by one of the entrances, you'll see the same guy get pulled over and over by the same guy. They time it perfectly so that no one can interrupt them, and they just keep going for the whole battlefield to get an A rank. At the same time, the people who are actually good at PvP are the people who want to PvP because they're good at it. And when they want to PvP, what does that mean? Well, that means that they're stuck in a fight for 20 to 30 minutes, probably, against someone willing to fight them. And if you're stuck in a fight for half the battlefield, guess how many points that person's getting? None. In fact, the person who avoids PvP completely to just play the minigame almost always ends up with more points than the person going around attacking people. Now, I guess there are some exceptions, right? Like if you go in by yourself and you pull people that are, they're solo and you just kill them really quick and then run to the next person, sure, you can get a lot of points doing that. But that doesn't really mean you're good at PvP if you're just running around killing what are basically noobs compared to you. And so it just baffles me. I see people talk about PvP as if battlefields are the end-all be-all. They'll look at the leaderboard and the top 5 rank in each nation, and they'll use this as an indicator. They'll say, wow, there's a Kra that's rank 1 in Brackmar. That must mean Kra is so good at PvP. I'm sorry, but no. In fact, Kra is, surprisingly, one of the worst classes in PvP. And meanwhile, the people who actually like to PvP in battlefields those are the people who are good at it. And those are the people who are stuck in a fight for 30 to 40 minutes or longer and usually get like a C rank by the end of the battlefield. So the system itself is flawed. And it's pretty obvious. Why is it a PVM minigame? Why are people getting rewarded for farming points off the same person over and over again? Why is it that the people who want a PvP are getting they're getting stalled, they're getting less points, they're getting less reward, and the people who don't PvP in the PvP minigame are being rewarded the most. So, yeah, I mean, that's why when I see the leaderboard or I see wings, they look cool. I won't lie, they look cool. I even might want some bigger wings. But it doesn't mean that that person's good at PvP. And don't get that mixed up. The only way you can tell if someone's good at PvP is by watching them fight. And maybe you try to fight them yourself. That's really the only way you can do it. You can tell, usually, if someone's quick, if they make quick decisions, if they're consistent against the classes they can beat. I'm also not saying that you can determine who's good at PvP just based on what class they play. Because if there was a class in the game with a button they press to just win automatically, and they beat everyone, that wouldn't make them good at PvP. That would just make them good at pressing that one button. So, at the end of the day, you really have to determine... When you think about who's good at PvP, you can make a judgment for yourself, but there really is no universal answer. I'll put it this way. So, in other games, how do you determine who the best player is, or who the best players are? Well, they usually have to be put up against other people that are just as hard to beat. That's what we call competition, and it's really not surprising that that would be the case. Now, for some reason, in this game, all you gotta do is do some PVM minigame and attack some noobs that can't defend themselves and kill them in one shot to get an S rank in every battlefield, and then that puts you on the top of the leaderboard, and somehow that makes you the best. So, I just really don't get it. I wouldn't even say that I'm that good at PvP because, well, all the fights that I usually do are 1v1. And to be honest, this game doesn't really have much besides that. We kind of only have 1v1 PvP. And if there is any group PvP, it's in the battlefield. And the people who are doing the group PvP aren't getting very many points. So you won't even notice them on the leaderboard. Now, does Ankama know this? As far as I know, they do. I wouldn't be surprised if they changed it eventually, but as of right now, we're kind of just stuck with it. But yeah, I need people to stop and think for a second. If you've ever been to a battlefield before, just think about how many points you can get by never attacking anybody. Let's say you go to Brakmar, and you go to a battlefield where it's 150 people versus 30, and you're on the team of 150. You can just do the PVM minigame part. If it's the Great Escort, you can just kill militia guards and plant boxes. And yeah, it's a little competitive. The PVM minigame itself is competitive. You have to compete with other people to click fast to kill those enemies, and then plant the boxes and find a spot. But probably the person who gets the most points is the person who sits there and farms kills off their guildie on the other side. And that's kind of it. Now, there is a free-for-all battlefield, but they're not that common. It's only one of 3. So, it doesn't really happen that often, and the number of points you get from it, again, it's really going to come down to people feeding off of a guildie, which I really wish they would fix. The flower battlefield, the Anaripsa battle, what's it called? Capture the Flower? It's really unbalanced. Have you noticed when you go in, let's say, like I said before, there's 150 people on one side and 30 on the other. Well, let's say you're that group of 30. You're in that group of 30, and you and your friends make a little team and you want to go fight people. Well, you might be able to get a few of the buffs. You can get that first buff and probably the second buff. But by the time you get your second buff, you're just getting attacked. And, you know, that's what you're there for. You're not there to play the PvM minigame. You want to fight people. But then you notice that the enemy team gets this little buff. It's called Anaripsa's Blessing, where they get 3 AP. I think it's 15% DI and then some crit. Or is it MP? I forget. I'm already forgetting what it is. But basically, just imagine the enemy team gets an extra 3 AP and some other stuff. And it's only because they have way more players than your team, than your nation. And so you go to PvP, and you're actually at a disadvantage just because you're in the wrong nation. However, if you were on the other side, you probably wouldn't be able to fight anybody because there's 5 times as many people. And at the end of the day, you're trying to fight these people who have an unfair advantage against you. And the fight might take a long time, and you'll end up with a C rank, while whoever is farming points off their guildie gets an A rank, or an S rank even. So, just something I wanted to bring up. It's a pretty short video. I hope you guys see my basic issues with Battlefields, especially with, and I'm not even necessarily talking about ALS. Like, I have my own other problems with ALS, and I'm mostly just talking about at 230. But, you know, I just wanted people to know my thoughts on Battlefields, and I've been playing since they were released, and it's always been the same thing. It really doesn't have much to do with PvP, although you can PvP. It's kind of like an afterthought, and that's what's weird about it, is the development for Battlefields. It really feels like PvP was an afterthought. It wasn't really designed for PvP. It was designed with PvP. And I can't understand why people try to make that connection with the leaderboard, showing like the top 5 people to be like the best PvPers or something, or like using it to justify nerfing a class or buffing a different class. Like, hey, if Kra is number 1 on the leaderboard, then, you know, we must have to nerf it in PvP. It's like, no. It really doesn't have any indication of how good that person is at PvP and that class as a whole. So, anyway, thanks for watching.